Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and I think we are award-winning for shows that we're going to have to bring you like one of these. We are back on the back of Tottenham Hotspur losing at home to Wolves in the Premier League. I think many that have followed, viewed, listened to Last Word on Spurs in these last couple of months would have had the feeling this may have been coming. I'm joined by three great, fabulous returning guests to Last Word on Spurs to help dissect, break down, and try and offer some therapy on the back of that defeat against Wolves, of course, at the Spurs Stadium. On the couch alongside me, back is Richard Cracknell. Cracks, maybe you'll be owed this because you're off for the rest of March, I must say. How are you, my man?
Well, I was all right till 3 o'clock this afternoon, to be honest, Rick. But no, I'm all good. Personally, all good. Sun will still come up tomorrow morning and all that. But we're not here to talk that old philosophy nonsense, are we? Listen, we were shit today. Simple as that. Everything was just not quite right, was it? Tactics. We lost the two fullbacks. Ponderous. And it just seems a little bit like the honeymoon with today's game has finished, and you got up Monday morning late to go to work, the trains are delayed, and the gas bills dropped on the mat at the same time. It seems to be crash today. Just off of it. And as you say, Rick, that was coming. We've had a lot of papering over the cracks, results where performances weren't quite at it. And look, this is. I know people are going to go, "Oh, here they go again, long-term project," but it is a project that we're in. But there is concerns within that for me, Rick. And I even, funny enough, I looked at our WhatsApp group, 27th of November. I did say that I think Ange has got to be more flexible within his systems in the Premier League. It looks for, to call it what it is, he looked like he got worked out a bit today, like he has the last couple of weeks. And I just think there needs to be some small changes. I haven't got to throw the baby out with the bath water, but, sometimes, like today, when you haven't got the personnel that you need, you might have to go 3-5-2, and you might just have to do a few different little bits and pieces. But there's just, I don't know, the Premier League's so rough, so tough, so clever as well. Everybody that plays in it and manages in it are clever people, and it looks like we got a little bit worked out today. So I don't know. Yes, let's see where we go from here. We're beginning to see what's what with Ange now after, what's that, match day? How many we played now, Rick, under him this season? 20 odd games. So, yeah, it's it concerns me that there's not enough flexibility in Ange ball. And I've said that on social media. And as I said back in November, that is a worry.
Yep, match day 25, Cracks. Match day 25. You know what? With a result like that, it does. Everything just goes out the window slightly. Back alongside me on this show, look, Russ has been saying for the last few weeks he hasn't really seen Ange ball. Delighted to get him back on as well to get his thoughts on it. Russ, before I do,
he's frozen.
Question. How are you, firstly?
Oh, I thought you were frozen there, Rick, but you're unfrozen. Yeah, yeah. Look. Like Crackers and everyone else, it kind of has been brewing this, but I'm fine. I mean, look, Tracy, what I thought about the game today in general terms, we're 7 months with Ange. The club was in a mess. So we're better off than where we were. It's just that on the pitch, there's quite a lot that's wrong. I totally agree with Crackers. Why wouldn't you play three at the back, pop an extra player in midfield, and dare I say it, put Sonny down the middle today? Because when you haven't got Porro and a doggy, you can't play anything like the football that he wants to play and we expect to see, that we saw earlier in the season. because the other two members of personnel, Ben Davies, who I thought Ben did okay, but okay is good enough now.
Not for this system.
And
Not for
no,
this system.
exactly. And Emerson Royale, who I thought was pretty average, they're not good enough to get to where we want to go. But I thought the passing was off. I thought we just didn't look as though we had any zip. Tactically, we were all over the place, and we were playing attack against defence in the second half. And I know Decky got a goal, but I have to tell you, I've been saying it for a while, Rick. He's way off the onions for me, and it's a real issue because we need him to play. I would have probably, if I'd have been the manager, but I'm not, would have put Brennan there today from the start. So there's all sorts of things that we can all see that I'm not going to go into details, because the whole point is that the viewers and the listeners will have their say and ask their questions and give their views. But, I really thought we'd finished third, and I'm going to stick with it, and people might think I'm an absolute lunatic. But if we get our act together, it's still possible. But United are playing well. Chelsea just had a game at City. City have slipped up. That lot are banging in, another 5 goals today. Liverpool have won. Villa have won.
Yep.
These are the teams that we've got to try and compete with. And at the moment, based on Brentford, Everton away, Brighton at home, and today, we're a way off.
We are. Russ, there's calls for many. They're asking you to narrate their life. They're asking you to tell them it's all going to be okay. No pressure, Russ. I'll let you settle in and let me bring around to a man that tries to tell us every week it will be okay over at the Tottenham way. And it's a man that is quite normally optimistic on there and gives us hope. Delighted to have back alongside me, Marcus Buckland, the last one on Spurs. Marcus, mate, firstly, how's things going before we get into the real stuff?
Well, actually, my biggest concern is that my charger is not working and it keeps telling me I'm on low battery power. So if I vanish, I will sort things out. That's an issue. Look, everything that Crackers and Russ have already said is worth echoing. I think the key thing today, from the moment I saw the starting 11, without the 2 fullbacks, we were going to struggle against a team like Wolves in particular. And Crackers, I think, has made a really good point in terms of the tactics, because we knew exactly what Wolves were going to do. They've become a real bogey team for us, by the way. They've beaten us in 4 now of the last 5 league meetings between the two sides. We know they have a very low block. They're happy to soak up the pressure. They kept inviting us forward, and we were doing that in a really pedestrian manner, crisscrossing it from one side to the other. Could Kulusevski make a little bit of space down the right? No, he couldn't. Could Sonny do something magical down the left? No, he was having one of his off days today. And it became patently clear to me really early on that we were playing into their hands. The strangest thing was that when Wolves finally scored, it was actually from a set piece. It was from a Wolves corner. I don't know what was going on with the marking. That was a terrible goal to give away. Their second goal, though, was classic Wolves. And it was on the cards throughout the afternoon, because we know what a high line we play. We were giving the ball away on too many occasions. Wham, bam, counter-attack. Terrific move, to be fair. Fantastic finish from Gomes, who I believe hadn't scored for a year in the Premier League, and he's gone and got 2 today. So that's typical. But it was coming. And I just felt that we at the other end were so placid, and we were missing the pace and the know-how of Udogie, who's been fantastic, and Porro as well. We missed Porro's set pieces. And the one other thing I'll say right from the word go is that I don't think James Maddison is close to 100%. At the moment, he's a little bit of a shadow of the guy that was brilliant before he picked up his injury.
Marcus, I've got to echo a lot of those thoughts. And what I will do is, look, as Russ said earlier on, the show is hugely about our viewers and listeners. And can I just say, look, on the back of that result, as you probably would expect, we had a huge influx of listener statements and questions. Over 75 came into the show. If we read out all 75, I think that would do us the favour. We wouldn't have to be here. But we'll give you a flavour of what came through the door or came through the post for the questions. Hod the God said, poor all over, still struggling with a lack of bottom. No killer instinct. Everyone got carried away at the start of the season. This team is not as good as people think to suggest. Top class striker was needed and never bought with regards to the summer. John Wardell said, it's clear to me that other teams have tactically worked us out in terms of how to play against us. And with our defence being so leaky, with Ange, we have to find a way to adapt in a side that he wants to set up to be in the Champions League for next season. We cannot keep having to come from behind every single game. Paul at Paul05 624 649 said O'Neill is very tactically astute. Plus, Ange needs to start adapting to the Premier League. It's the best league in the world because it attracts the best coaches, and teams are working us out. Has Ange's Ange ball figured it out now and been nullified? Team use the same counter tactics against us every week, and we seem to have no answer. We're not built to break down a low block side. What I would say about that is, just on that point, Paul, whilst I do agree there needs to be, I think, some variation and adaptation to Ange's tactics, despite Spurs coming up against low block teams, they have found a way to break teams down. Nowhere near what we would want them to, and nowhere near in the style that we saw in the opening 10 games. I think, again, is a massive concern. Hi, guys. Sorry. Is that my flicker in there? Yep. Just to finally sum up on these questions, it might be one of those nights. Bye-bye said, really poor again, waited 3 months to get the band back together. And so far, I've not seen signs telling me that this effective system is working. Look, we're going to go straight into it. I'm going to come around to you, Cracks, here. Look, Wolves, they do complete a double over Spurs and fully deserved to. That result, as we said in the green room, had been coming. But look, if you can't or won't work out in the defensive side of the game in the league, you're not very amount to much. O'Neill's now side of beating us, as Marcus alluded to there, 3 times in a row. Good coaches, Cracks, are working out Spurs' system. And Wolves in general were a real constant threat on the counter, set up brilliantly by the manager. Spurs, as we've already alluded to, did hugely miss Porro and a doggy, but they had enough to create more and were punished for a poor first half yet again. We're dropping down to 5th. And as Marcus alluded to there, Wolves are becoming very much a bogey team for Spurs. Cracks, where is the way forward? I mean, are you concerned that overall, as the listeners and viewers have suggested there, Ange's system is being worked out?
I've proof of the pudding's in the eating, or whatever the saying is. It goes in the cake of the eating of the whatever. But look, last few games, Everton, Brighton, even Sheffield, we look like we've been worked out, and nothing seems to change from our side. So teams are coming low block, catch us on the break, and when they do catch us on the break, we really get caught on the break, don't we? We are literally like a boxer that just has his hands round down by his waist and just keeps the chin out in the hope that they will actually catch you with that great big haymaker. And if that haymaker doesn't come, you will get jabbed because you're just holding no defense up. So yeah, it's a tough one. It's almost like Ange has come in, and there's this thing with Ange ball, almost like he needs now to be his own tribute band, almost, doesn't he? Because that's what expected, and he said that's what he's going to do, and any changes would maybe look. I don't know. Maybe he thinks, oh, people think I'm weak because I'm changing my philosophies. I think it's worked in Scotland, where the quality of the league as a whole isn't that of the Premier League, and also, Japan, where he's managed the Premier League. As I've said before, is just ruthless. It is absolutely, it's top of the shop. Maybe not technically play wise, and that's why it's so good to watch. I mean, there's probably La Liga more technically a better league as such, but there's some real clever operators in that league, really clever, and I think you've just got to be able to dance a few dances as a manager and just change things slightly, week in, week out, depending on who you're playing, depending on what personnel you've got. But it just doesn't feel like that changes. It just seems to be plan A, plan A, plan A, and you'll soon get worked out. You won't have the quality of player to be able to do that every week. I know people say Pep's got a philosophy and he doesn't change, but Pep plays by different rules because of the players he's got, because he's got the absolute cream of the crop playing for him. So he can do that most weeks he can. But even within like Pep systems, he does change slightly. So it's one of those things. Either we're going to have to get personnel that can absolutely play this type of football, or we are going to get days like today. It's abundantly obvious that Davies and Royal and Højbjerg are just not built to play this type of football. So you've got to play the cards that you're dealt with. And if you have got Royal and Davies, you can't play them in the same sort of way that you play Porro and Udogie. You just can't. So yeah, it was disappointing, Rick, that he didn't change system, didn't try something a little bit different. And Wolves do it perfectly. They're absolutely perfect for it. You know, they're dogged. They play that type of football, but with some pretty decent players in amongst that as well. So it's little wonder that they have actually like dicked us 3-4 times on the trot now, because you know, with a Sheffield United, you might be able to just nick 1 or 2, but with a Wolves today, we had so much possession, but we just couldn't find a way through them because they're so well drilled and players that are good at playing that type of football, and then crash bang wallop. We concede off of that set piece, which was just awful, absolutely awful. And the second one as well, absolutely awful, because of 2 different tactical things we were getting wrong. Corners, well, it just didn't look like there was any tactics there. I don't know if that's zonal marking or what, but you know, I've never got zonal marking. You don't mark zones, you mark players, don't you? Surely. And then the second one, you're just gonna concede if you're playing that high line up against a team like Wolves. So yeah, concern, Rick, concern.
Can I say one thing about that? And you know, I'm not going to disagree directly with Crackers. What I would say is that we are 7 months into the new managerial era. He is looking, irrespective of some of these ridiculous articles suggesting he's going to go to Liverpool in the summer, he's looking to build a foundation that's going to take us to a different level over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Now, today is a difficult one because the 2 fullbacks are crucial to the system. But I just think Ange is the sort of guy who is not going to change a system for one game because Porro and Udogie are missing. He needs to keep it going. I think it highlights the importance, obviously, of the summer transfer window. And let's be fair, it's a difficult system to play. And not surprisingly, Spurs don't have enough players comfortable with it at the moment. And clearly Emerson Royal is not. And Ben Davies, who I really like, and I thought actually had a pretty good game today, but he doesn't fit into it. Højbjerg, he'll be going in the summer. He doesn't. And, I just think that Ange would turn around if he was on this show tonight and say, Crackers, look, I know I didn't have the right personnel, but if I start panicking every time 2 or 3 players are missing and start meddling with a different system just to try and dig us out of a hole, we'll go nowhere in the long term. So we've got to deal with this, appreciate that we're short in some areas, but we are still 5th in the league. We might still finish in the Champions League. I will go out and strengthen those key positions in the summer. And the more we keep playing this system, the better the players will understand it. And long term, the better we will be as a football team.
You know what, Marcus, on that point, you know, many are suggesting, again, I refer back to the viewers and listeners that make up this show, a huge amount of comments that have come in. I mean, you suggest there, Marcus, that Cracks alluded to it, you don't believe he will change the system or change his tactics. But you know what? Jordan Hussein says here, since the 2-2 draw with United, we have looked so void of Ange ball, but I don't understand why. It's not good enough. Steve Corfine asks, when was the last time Spurs played well? I honestly can't remember. Tony Nickbush says, Big Ange got his lineup wrong and along with his tactics. I think we've alluded to the way, obviously, he lined up. So if he's intent and hell-bent on sticking to the way he's going to play, Marcus, has something got to do in that then? I mean, I just wonder, because I'm the same as you. You know, you look at the way he's set up and all the previous clubs he's played for, his biggest trait is that he doesn't change, whether it's Celtic, whether it's in the J League. The one common thing about Ange is he does not change his way. And my worrying thing, Marcus, that you come back on this point is that this is the Premier League, as we've alluded to. It's got the best coaches in the world. If you're not willing to slightly adapt or slightly change, I am concerned, given the caliber and quality of player he's got. I'm not sure if it's sustainable over the course of the next 10, 11, 12 games we've got remaining now to finish in the Champions League. Is that fair for me to suggest that, Marcus?
I think it's a really fair point. I just think that Ange is pretty stubborn, and he's not going to, because if he does change it, people will say, oh, okay, so you've had a couple of bumps in the road, you're panicking now. And if the results don't improve then, what does he do? I mean, the critical thing is we get Udogie back and we get Porro back as quickly as possible. We get Maddison back playing 100%. I've said about Richarlison on a number of occasions this season that I really admire his work rate. I like him as a footballer. I don't think he's good enough as a centre forward going down the middle in this Spurs team. I really don't. I think there has to be an upgrade in that regard. And he's also, the other thing, of course, is that we had this discussion actually on the Tottenham Way podcast. Sorry for the plug there. Does Ange know his best? Does Ange know his best 11 in this day and age? Is it all about best 11s, or is it simply fitting the right 11 to whatever game you're playing? And if that means, having Basuma at the base of the midfield today as opposed to Bentancur, little tweaks here and there. I'm not saying he's going to change the system. Then fair enough. But we are still not seeing a regular starting 11 because, what I don't quite understand, maybe it's just bad luck. I mean, we've only had 3 cup ties. We're going to have played, 42 games by the end of the season.
At least.
And yet we're getting injury problems the whole time. And we look a little bit tired and jaded as though we're playing twice a week, every week. That's what I don't quite understand. And I would like to know what is going on behind the scenes on the training ground. Why do some of the players look a bit jaded? Is Maddison 100% fit? And that's another issue as well, by the way, because if he isn't, and he stayed on for 85 minutes today, and part of our problem, I think, is that we don't have an able replacement for James Maddison. And Lo Celso comes on. He's been here for 3 or 4 years. He's not a bad player, but he's always injured. He's not of a sufficient level. We need another flair player because we just couldn't break down that resolute defence today. And we didn't really look as though we were going to be honest.
Russ, I want to bring you in. Look, it's for the first time this year, Spurs losing the Premier League. It is a poor performance given in what Tottenham really needed to win to keep up that run in terms of going, obviously, vying for the Champions League spots. Look, Spurs have had a few home wins that could have gone either way recently, and you've been here for a number of them. This one doesn't go our way. And I'd say, look, we didn't really deserve much from the game. Really, really sloppy. A serious drop-off in relation to, of course, losing Porro and Udogie to those that are the next available options coming in. Is it down to just the squad selection, or is it deeper, Russ, for you in terms of the tactical elements of the system Spurs are trying to deploy under Ange for you?
Well, look, whatever team he picks and whatever personnel, if they're sloppy with their passing, and our passing has been off for 2 or 3 games at least. When we were passing slickly, it was Ange ball. I think that is part of the problem. I don't know why that would be. Just randomly thinking about it all, our set pieces defending are dreadful. And actually, when we're attacking, they're awful. So I don't know who's drilling them. Is it Ryan Mason? Which I would be surprised about if it is, because I think we look particularly weak in that area. I think that we've got a manager who, it's all right, mate, and being Australian and who gives a damn and all that. But he's never been involved in a league like this before, as the boys and a lot of the viewers and the listeners will be thinking. And I do think that sometimes you have to adapt a little bit. And he may well have to do that. And he shouldn't worry about what anybody else says if he does change things around and we get better results, because he can also always go back to his philosophy. But if you look at the game today, Rick and everybody, the crucial bit is that you've got wide players who can take on fullbacks and cross the ball. Not today. Not today at all. Werner didn't do it when he came on. Brennan Johnson didn't do it when he came on. Kulusevski didn't really do it at all, hasn't done for a long while. I don't know what's happened to him. Sonny, for me, should be down the middle. When he deputised those seasons ago for Harry Kane, I mean, he was a goal-scoring machine. I think he prefers it. Even he really doesn't take on a fullback and get to the byline and cross it. So it's crucial that we do that. And then we sit there and watch the second half and we go, well, we've got all the ball sideways, 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 out wide, back inside, sideways, side. No one will shoot. And we're playing against a low block. Well, what on earth were they practicing against in training? You know, they knew what Wolves were going to do. So what are they doing in training? All these questions and conundrums, you know, have to be answered, really. And it's a very difficult situation because it is only one game, 7 months on from our club, from a playing point of view, being, you know, in dire straits after Stellini and Conte. And things are looking up. But now we've hit these bumps in the road that we've spoken about and in the past. And I think we just got to keep calm. But all of us know, every one of us Spurs fans know when we watch us play that it isn't right. And, you know, it's all right to say, Rick, oh, well, you know, if Porro and Udogie had been playing, well, I would remind you in the last game against Brighton, Udogie was okay, gave away the ball a lot. Pedro Porro didn't have his best game.
No.
So I don't think we can say that they are the saviours either. I do think we've got to up the level of players in the squad, and they've had 2 reasonable windows. And as Marcus said earlier, the summer is the crucial time. But we've still got the passengers in the squad that we've always had, bar a couple who we've hoyed out, you know. So there's all sorts of reasons. And it's only a game. But if we don't get Champions League, I'll be furious.
Well, I think given the point, Russ, and you've said it a lot, we've been in and around there pretty much all season. It would be a serious, I think, disappointment now to not achieve it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, Tom very kindly sent in a few comments here. He said, look, the first 10 games, we looked so controlled. Since then, it has been panic ball, not Ange ball. It feels like the last 5 minutes of games during the whole game. Am I the only one who thinks Kulu is the only one trying to grab the game by the horns? So many were average, but Kulu gets too much grief from our fans. Tom, what I would say on that for me, I think Kulusevski has found it really, really hard, I think, to find consistency in his game. Arguably, really, since that first season where he looked formidable. I don't know what's happened over the course of the last 12 months. That on his day, he's a fabulous player. Of course, he got us back into the Brighton game last week. I think when you look at the game overall today, and I think the guys alluded to this, Wolves are the perfect team to come up against Ange Ball, in my opinion. But I don't think you can call it Ange Ball because Spurs, for me, as you've said, these numerous last couple of months, haven't really been playing Ange Ball. And the last, I would say, couple of months is a concern. And again, as Marcus alluded to it is a long-term project, but there is still that dropping alarm off that when you look at the first best 11 to then what comes in as replacement players, they simply aren't of the level. But again, I'll allude to the point what Russ said as well, that you take Udogie and Porro last week, and they also didn't have the greatest performances. So it is a concern. After the game, Ange said, I'm not a magician, I'm a football manager. When asked if there's any psychological tricks he can pull to lift the players. On the game itself, he said, look, again, we weren't great in the first half. We controlled the game enough, but we weren't threatening enough in terms of dominating the game. Chasing the game is always difficult against a team that is so good on the counter-attack in Wolves, and we were made to pay for it. Both goals are so disappointing from our point of view. We paid the price for not being concentrated or disciplined in our football. It wasn't through the lack of effort. We had them camped in break and they score. You can't keep men from behind and doing that every week. We need to be better in the first half. We've had injuries all year and certainly performed better than that. And, you know, when I hear him after games, I do find myself nodding cracks a lot to what he says. But again, it goes back to that point that when you've seen the same similar performances over the last 8 matches or so, or 8 weeks or so, you want to see changes. You want to see some form that we're learning. And again, I appreciate we're in a new, obviously, system, a new culture, a new manager. But Cracks, do you still feel for you're seeing enough here in relation to the fact that this team over time are going to improve?
Yeah, I've no doubt that it will do. That when the personnel do change and a better quality of personnel come in, and with this philosophy that Ange has, then we should be able to start to find ways to beat these low block teams. But it's that in the interim, isn't it? That's the problem. The bumps in the road, and we knew they were coming. And I just you have to worry or think, does the Premier League give you enough time now to be able to make those changes, to go through those hard yards, if you like days like today? That's the problem. Everything in the Premier League is literally instant. So it kind of comes down to us as fans, the board, and everybody to hold their nerve and be able to get through this part of it until such times as you do get the personnel that can fill in every position better than we've currently got. More so with the squad, I think, to be able to change it round, freshen it up. That should help. I think, like Marcus said, if we do start changing philosophy, then you're a little bit all over the place, a little bit of a hodgepodge of, well, you're just not sticking with what you're supposed to be doing. But I think there's ways within the way. So just some little tweaks here and there, a few little changes that as I said, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I'm sure there is just a few little tweaks and differences, a bit of different personnel that we could do in the odd game here and now. And he just has to communicate that to the squad. Look, today we're a couple short here and now. I'm going to do this, but that doesn't mean that we are completely turning away from our philosophies, but we just need to cut our cloth a little differently.
Marcus, I want to bring you in. Ange was asked after the game in relation to the slow starts we had recently. He said, look, that's the last couple of games, not doing anything differently. Sometimes mindset going in, sometimes opposition, sometimes concept of the game. But for us to dominate games like we want to, does mean that we need to start aggressively and put opposition on the back foot. We didn't start well in this game. First half wasn't great. We didn't capitalise on the moments that we had. Second half, we had them camped in their half and create some decent opportunities. You can see the second, and then you're chasing the game of football. Many are alluding to the fact, look, it's not the first time Ange just seemingly found it really hard to work out teams against good managers. Is there that argument now, Marcus, for you that good coaches are starting to work Spurs out on the whole?
Well, yeah, because clearly they've been able to have a look at us for quite a long time now. And Crackers and Russ are right. We're up against the best of the best. Gary O'Neill is proving himself to be a really shrewd manager. I think he's become the first manager to win twice at our place with different teams, because he did it with Bournemouth last season as well. So I think we have to give him a little bit of credit. So, yeah, the more we play, the more those other managers can say, you see, there's the gaps here. We know that we can press them. And it was one of those matchups today that always looked a little bit dodgy. And that's why Crackers actually has made a valid point that perhaps sometimes you do have to cut your cloth accordingly. But it's such a difficult balancing act. I mean, I had when I heard that Porro was out, Andrew Doggy was out, I thought, I wonder if Kulusevski could play at right back. I don't know if he'd be comfortable to do that. I'd love to have seen him perhaps try Kulusevski at right back. I know he hasn't been quite the force of late that we want him to be. I still think that he's one of those players that you can easily underestimate. And, he's young as well. When you look at Kulusevski, I think, he's mid-20s, he's been around for a long time. He's still a young guy. I thought maybe today could have been an opportunity to play him there and maybe to start with Johnson further forward, or Werner, whoever it might have been, and try and tweak a few things in that regard, rather than play with Emerson, who, as much as he tries, I think we all know is not going to be a long-term answer. So this is a vulnerable period. You come in as a new manager, you blow everybody away the first few games because nobody anticipated Spurs playing in the sort of free-flowing manner that they did. So now the question is, are you, brave enough to keep going? I think Ange is. B, are you good enough to work out where maybe one or two little tweaks need to be implemented, and then C, come the summer, can you identify the right players to take us on to the next level? And of the A, Bs and Cs, that for me is the most important dynamic, because I think, listen, 50-50, I still think we can finish top four. I mean, maybe fifth place might be enough for the Champions League. We don't yet know. At the start of the season, I don't think many of us really anticipated a Champions League finish. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, you're going to finish 10th in the league, something like that. So of course I want us to be in the Champions League. And the way we've played for most of this season, it would be hugely disappointing not to be. But I do think this is just part one of the journey. And I don't think we should be like typical football fans who are going to freak out because we've had a disappointing home defeat to Wolves and say, it's not working. Let's see how we fare. We've got a week off next week. So hopefully for the Palace game, everybody will be back. We can get back on track and just see whether with Maddison at his best again, hopefully. Bentancur, to me, Bentancur's not been quite right since he's come back as well. Kulusevski just a little bit off the pace. Even Udogie past couple of weeks, not at his very best. Russ was right. Porro didn't have a great game last week either. So, they're all human. I don't want to panic. And I think it is a little bit worrying because, of course, teams are starting to work us out a little bit. But I want to see us move on to the next step in this development. And there will be some bumpy little journeys along the way. And today was an example of that.
Yeah, I mean, I know everyone hates that T word, transitional, because I think many going into the season build it as being transitional. But again, when you look at the fact, then Russ has alluded to as well, we've been in and around that top clutch of the league for what feels like an eternity since the start of the season. So to see us drop away now would be a real shame. But again, I acknowledge the points that many are suggesting that, look, although it is our first defeat of the year, it's only our sixth defeat of the season. We haven't really seen that term Ange ball, you'd argue, since the last 15 minutes against Chelsea, which you're going back to the first 10 games of the season. Now, again, we try and provide some fair balance on this show and try and look at all angles of it. I mean, after the game, Russ, Andy's asked, do Tottenham concede too many chances defensively? He says, I don't think we do. We conceded 2 or 3 good chances to Wolves on the counter. Against Wolves, that is going to happen. For us, we're still trying to build something. I think a lot of our defensive work this season has been outstanding. We'll keep trying to improve in all areas of our game. Now, what I will pick up on the back there, Russ, coming to you, is that I think we've had only 1 clean sheet since October. I think it's only 1 clean sheet in the last 15, 16 games. So to suggest that he doesn't think we've got a problem defensively, I wouldn't disagree with Andrew much, but I have to say defensively, I don't think we look very much sound at the back, Russ.
Well, I'd like to sit down with him and look at the video today. Both goals unmarked, both of them. Well, yeah, we're quite good defensively, aren't we? I mean, at the other end of the pitch, Rick, as well, no shot on target at home against Wolves in the first half.
Yep.
I mean, that isn't good, mate. And it was pretty close to that against Brighton as well. Yep. And Wolves and Brighton are very, very similar teams, well coached, good technical players. And today I noticed again the way the Wolves players in defence did those one-touch triangles, really clever football to get out and try and break the stuff we were doing when we were playing Ange ball. But we're all two-touch football now. And it's very frustrating. It might be something to do with the confidence of the players because they'll know that it isn't quite clicking. Some of them not quite fit. As the boys have been saying tonight, it's very difficult when you're an elite level athlete. You've been out for 2.5 months within 3 games to be where you were. So, I do think defensively is absolutely crucial. But every football fan will tell you, we know we're going to score goals against Tottenham. The problem is our chance-making ratio has plummeted. And that's why we're not scoring many goals. And we can't beat the low block, which means other teams defensively are better than us.
It's hard to agree with that. I mean, Ange after the game was asked whether that loss rules Spurs out of the title race completely. He said, look, we're trying just to be the best possible team we can and progress this year to build something. That doesn't change. Our focus is trying to finish strong and developing our football team. I think, again, look, I must just say this point before we go for our first break, that I think if you're a Wolves fan, I know there's a few in here that are watching the show, that they must be absolutely head over heels with Gary O'Neill, because that performance, that was total discipline, and they offered a genuine threat every time they went forward. I know it's not last word on Wolves, but, I think he's rightly winning a lot of admirers every week, Wolves, because as a side, this kind of game was set up perfectly for them, because on the counter, I think Marcus alluded to this, they have got Spurs really in the palm of their hands. They're a real bogey team for Tottenham now. And look, I think it's, again, worth emphasising, Wolves are now beating Spurs for a third consecutive game for the first time in their history. And it's worth me emphasising the point that Spurs now will not play another game for the next 2 weeks due to Chelsea's participation in the Carabao Cup final. The reason why I'm laughing is it's come at a point of the season where, could you imagine, Maurizio goes and wins a cup now? I mean, I tell you what, Jason McGovern, who I adore and love, Cracks, I mean, he warned me he could see it coming, and they're just finding some form, Chelsea. They've just gone away and got a point at Man City. I can see Marcus is smiling. I don't even want to come in there. He's biting away to come in there. Marcus, are we going into a concerning end of February?
Sorry to butt in, but I knew this was going to happen. Pochettino never took the domestic cups all that seriously when he was at Spurs. I know we got to a couple of FA Cup semi-finals and a final as well in the League Cup, but it was always the bigger picture, wasn't it? We were going to become a big Champions League team. It used to do my nutting. And now, by courtesy of the most lucky, it was just a lucky set of fixtures that got them through to the final. I sincerely hope that Liverpool put 5 past them next week, but they just seem to be peaking at the right time. And it would be absolutely typical. Chelsea have had a horror season. We've looked pretty good. If Poch is dancing up and down on the turf at Wembley next week with a bit of silverware over his head, I'm leaving the country for a few weeks.
That honestly would be hard to bear. Look, what we are going to do, we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners and audio. We've got a good couple of thousand of you that are here bringing in the last word on Spurs therapy. I'm joined by some absolute top tier panelists here. I've got Compare and the late night presenting shows of Richard Cracknell alongside me. Your late night Legends Nights. Can I just say I'm losing the man for the whole of March. He's got Legends Nights going on, which you'll be hearing on our audio feed for you. I'm joined by broadcast extraordinaires Russ Williams and Marcus Buckland here that are steering you through, guiding you through this tricky last one on Spurs, where the therapy is very much back on the feet to Wolves in the Premier League. Look, again, guys, I know I must say a massive thank you. We've had over 75, 80 questions that have come into us here on Last One on Spurs. We would love to read them all, and we really, truly would. But just to give you a flavour again in terms of the way Spurs finished that game statistics-wise, if I can, 15 shots to 12 in Spurs' favour. Again, a lot of these stats don't bear really relevance to some of the first half displays, because Spurs went into that end of the first half without even a shot on target, even despite the fact you look at Spurs' completion of passes, 6-3-7 to Wolves' 2-1-2. And I think it's fair to say, as Wolves have done to us a number of times, absolute killer instinct on the counter-attack that got on that win. Passing accuracy 88-72 in Spurs' favour. Possession-wise, Spurs dominated it 71% to 29%. But ultimately, really, despite having a huge amount of possession, Spurs at times looked clueless really what to do with the ball. Now, in terms of the lineup for the game, we saw Ange make 4 changes to take on Wolves. And after making his return from the bench last weekend, Heung-min Son was back in that Spurs starting 11. 31-year-old Timo Werner, who obviously started last week in attack, was dropped to the bench. Thus seeing him, of course, join Richarlison, Dejan Kulusevski in the front line. Now, Ange was forced into 2 changes, as we know. We saw Pedro Porro and Destiny Udogie pick up knocks during the week, meaning Emerson Royale started at right back, with Ben Davies getting the nod in the place of Udogie on the opposite side. That meant yet again, Radu Dragusin, Spurs' January signing, continued on the bench. I'm going to come on to him in a second. But back in the side was Basuma after his recent participation in the Asian Cup with Mali. So Spurs, in terms of the side, lined up with Vicario, Emerson, Romero, Ven and Ben Davies, Basuma, Sarr, Maddison, Kulusevski, Richarlison, Son, with a bench of Austin, Dragusin, Højbjerg, Skip, Bentancur, Lo Celso, Werner, Johnson, Hill. Worth me noting that was Lo Celso's first return in terms of a match day squad. Austin, of course, replacing the injured Fraser Forster. And in terms of injury luck at Tottenham, many might not be surprised by this, but we do still wish him all the best. Ryan Sessegnon was in the under-21s team today and picked up an injury. So his setback goes even further. I'm sure we'll hear more from Ange on that in his next presser, which is in a couple of weeks' time, in terms of who knows where Sess's recovery time is by then. Who knows? I think that's really been the story of that guy's last couple of years. Can't stay fit. And if you can't stay fit, how can you possibly really have a real understanding of how good that player can be? Look, Marcus, let me ask you a question. Rayo Dragoshin, everyone ballistic to get him through the door in January. He had a fight with Bayern Munich for his services, yet to make his first start in a Tottenham Hotspur shirt. I just felt today would have been the perfect time to give everybody a lift in the stadium. No Udogie, no Porro. Let me ask you, why couldn't we have seen Dragoshin come into the lineup and switch to what Cracks alluded to at the start of the show, a back three?
Well, yeah, it would have been an interesting selection. Obviously, we've seen a couple of cameo performances from him so far. I've got to be absolutely honest, and he's only been on the pitch for a few minutes. He didn't fill me with complete confidence on the two occasions that I did see him. And Ange obviously knows what he's doing on the training ground. I mean, the problem for Dragoshin, if he's not going to change the system, our two best players really are Romero and Van de Ven. I mean, listen, I love Romero. We know what he brings to the team. Van de Ven, his passing today, actually, Van de Ven's passing was disappointing, I thought. But the pace, the tackles, you know, he's absolutely fantastic. It was just one of those days, to be honest, Ricky, where everybody was... I couldn't pick one Spurs player who had a really good game today. And, you know, whatever system you're playing, if all of your players are at best getting a 6 or maybe a 7 out of 10 mark, then you're going to struggle, particularly against a team like Wolves, who are set up so well to play us, as we've already mentioned. So, yeah, I mean, we did really well to get Dragoshin. I wonder what he's thinking on the bench. I know we got the better of the deal, with all due respect, with Eric Dyer going to Bayern Munich. And I believe he started their 3-0 defeat last week against Leverkusen, didn't he? I'm not suggesting for 1 minute it was Eric's fault, but, you know, yes. I think we'll keep going back to what Ange can do to change things. I just feel that he's not the type to suddenly switch to 3 at the back. Dragoshin will wait his time, and at some point Romero's going to either get a suspension or an injury, or Van de Ven is, and then we'll see, you know, how he can play in his best position there. But I'll go back to the point. I just think that we're all frustrated. We're all disappointed. We have had 2 or 3 subpar performances. Despite that, we've been picking up points. We've been a little bit fortuitous, perhaps, but at least because we keep going forward, as we did against Brighton last week. You know, I think we've scored the second most number of goals post 90 minutes. I know we've conceded the most number of goals post 90 minutes as well. But, you know, sometimes fortune favours the brave. And so that's why I don't want to come down too hard on Ange. It hasn't been a great run. Things aren't brilliant at the moment, but I want to feel that these are teething issues. That T word that you used is a fact. This is transitional. We've come a hell of a long way from the horror story towards the end of last season when you think back to what we were doing under Conte and then Stellini. So, you know, whether you brought in Dragoshin today, tried to change the system a bit, I just think that this is a long-term journey that we're on, and we've got to stay patient.
I agree. Look, again, I think, you know, I'll reference that point. It's the first defeat of the year. You know, Spurs have had 6 in the Premier League. It's certainly nowhere near what it was like last season. I think the problem is because in those first 10, 12 games covered with you, Russ, you know, that expectation was set ever so high. I think had you flipped around that in terms of having that period now, having that at the start, I think everyone would be obviously delighted with how far Spurs have come. But because we started so well and we're now in a situation where, to coin a phrase, we've got the band back together to some degree, I think many were excited by the fact of having now the core component of the team around. We were going to now see a real improvement in performances. And I think the recognition was the fact that because we haven't had that the last 15, 20 games, that was a reason why we could understand why performances weren't so great. So then to have, you know, players available and not get results. But again, I can't disagree from the fact that Udogie and Porro, that's a huge, huge drop-off to the players coming in of Romero and Davies' level. But when you look at Spurs, the way we started that game, and before I do, just a big shout out to James Maddison. He walked out of a young lad of 6 years old, Samuel. I don't know if anyone picked this up.
That was amazing.
Game. Yeah. You know, it's terrible Palsy who recently walked a mile for charity. Now, look, I know it's hard. We've had a defeat. I know it's gut-wrenching, but just for a moment to pause and just say some of the great work that goes behind the scenes at Tottenham from the community, that young lad, that 6-year-old, will never forget that day. And it was actually a beautiful moment, both for Tottenham and James in the tunnel, that I just thought was such a lovely, lovely moment for that family, for that kid. He came out, look, result wasn't what we wanted, but a lovely moment there. But from the very start, Russ, we saw really Wolves threaten. Big chance in the opening moments for Hwang, who blazed it over from close range. We fast forward to the goal, and yet it's another goal, Russ, we concede from a corner. And we couldn't really say, on the balance of the first half, they didn't deserve it. He was all alone to head in. And I think we've said this now for the last few weeks, Russ. We've got to get better, haven't we, at defending set pieces? We have to.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it, excuse me, earlier in the show. It's absolutely crucial. And incidentally, I think Vicario could have been the man of the match for us today, because it could have been 5. They got 2 goals. Hwang should have scored after about 3 minutes. You mentioned that. And Vicario made 2 unbelievable saves. So that is the worrying thing. But at set pieces, there are issues, attacking and defending, obviously. You know, the first goal, you just go, oh, God, another set piece. And you wonder what they're doing in training. I mean, I'm sure they're doing everything they can. But, that, you know, to us fans, you go, again? What are they doing in training? So maybe we'll find out, Rick. But, you know, we've got Romero and Micky Van de Ven there. You know, they're both capable of heading the football, as we know. Yep. Where were they? Why was he, for the first goal, completely unmarked? Bonkers.
Yeah. I mean, just on that point of the goal, you know, completely free header from 8 yards out.
Yeah.
He's 5'9". I mean, Gomes is 5'9". He's just had a free header on the edge of our 6-yard box from a corner, completely and utterly unmarked. And I don't know whether there's that focus now because of what's happened with Vicario in the last few weeks. Cracks, come over to you. That's now taken away from the fact of what we need to do. I mean, you mentioned earlier, zonal marking, man-to-man, what are we doing? But really, ultimately, Cracks, you know, to concede the way we do there, is that a real concern, Cracks, that we haven't really got out of our game?
Yeah, very much so, Rick. It's I can't see what they are actually doing in training to defend set pieces like this, and we keep getting done by them as well. I hate zonal marking. It just doesn't. I just don't get it. I really do not get it. It seems like one of these clever things that got set up. And just I don't know. Somebody came up with the idea and they go and gone with it. I don't know, Rick. I really do not get zonal marking. Just pick up a player. Just be strong. We've got some big lads in that defence there now as well. Micky Van de Ven's a big lad. Emerson Royal, the same. Romero, a strong lad. So a 5'9" striker or forward player that hasn't scored for a year, just getting a free header like that, it's just honestly, it just beggars belief. It was a terrible like setup. Everything was just wrong about it. But again, you know, that's those little changes within the overall thing that we're trying to do, the overall philosophy. Just change something like that, you know, just go back to man-to-man marking. And I mean, this with Dragusin and VDV, they've both played at left back, you know, they have both actually played at left back in the past. So there was room to bring Dragusin, and one of his big things is headers. He loses very, very few headers. I was reading a coaching piece on him a while ago, and in the air, he's phenomenal. So again, today, maybe, just maybe, if we wasn't zonal marking and he is on the pitch, he clears that and we get into the break 0-0. And then we go 1-0 up in the start of the second half, and then you're in the ascendancy. It's you know, abundantly clear that Davies and Royal just can't play that type of system. So, yeah, that first goal, Rick, was just, I don't know. It came at such a terrible time as well, right at the end of the half. But having said that, we were lucky not to be 2 or 3 down going into
Yeah.
the break. We really was. So concerns. There's just lots of little concerns, isn't there? There's nothing absolutely terrible, but there's a lot of little things that could be tweaked and just put right. Yeah, exactly. But they're all sort of coming together to form a perfect storm. But unforgivable for a player 5'9" to be able to do that unmarked. It's just not at this level. At this level, it's awful.
Look, I'll be honest with you. I skipped a lot of the games in the first half because you've alluded to their cracks. We could have been more than just a goal down at that point. And just in the build-up to that move, Richie had hacked the ball away when a big shout would have allowed him to actually leave the ball. But instead, the cross winged in. Gomes done well. But, I mean, again, I don't want to dig out players. It's not a kind of show for that. But Sonny, bless him, was near us and appeared to duck the header. I mean, so hardly under pressure. I'm not sure why. But we went into that half-time, before that, Vicario made an absolutely brilliant save to deny Sarabia, but the offside flag went up. Spurs could have been in a lot worse predicament, but they went into that first half. Spurs a goal down, 0 shots on target in the first half to Wolves, who had 4. And look, you know what, Marcus? Spurs were known in the early part of the season for their real, genuine fast starts, but that's now 5 home matches without a first half goal now. We take into account obviously the lineup in terms of the restrictions but that's a 3rd game in a row now Spurs have conceded. They had a run under Conte where they were that bad in the first half and good in the second half. It's echoes are similar of that. Can you put it down to why we're going through this similar pattern?
No, I was thinking that today. It's a real sense of deja vu because you're quite right. There was that awful period under Conte when we couldn't do anything in the first half, and then we would come to life, and often it would be a little bit too late. And of course, the big problem is if you go behind to a team like Wolves, that's just perfect for them because they don't have to change anything. They keep their low block up, and they know that they're going to exploit us because we're pressing forward even more to try and get back into the game. So, the last few weeks, the fact that we've conceded first to Brighton, we've conceded first to Brentford as well, we're making life that much harder for ourselves. I think we're the sort of team, obviously, actually, that goes out the window to a degree because we did score first against Everton. But if we get on the front foot, I think we can be there's going to be a day before the end of the season when we're going to put 4-5. We're going to put 6 past somebody. Don't get me wrong. In fact, we're going to put 10 past somebody. We keep saying we're going to give someone a cuffing, but I'll be honest with you, Marcus. I'm feeling we're the ones going to get the cuffing. Yeah, we're going to give somebody a cuffing. Don't you worry about that, Ricky. But we might get cuffed a couple of times again before the end of the season. But yeah, it doesn't help, and I can't explain it. I really can't because the atmosphere is great. You guys were spot on. It was a wonderful moment when Maddison and the mascot came out. I love the trumpet playing now. Everybody's up singing just before kickoff. We are all set. And actually, I thought for the first couple of minutes today, I thought, okay, we've started quite brightly here. And we forced a chance early on. And then it became so apparent that we had no pace. We were playing at such a pedantic pace, just passing the ball here and there. It was slow motion stuff. And I can't explain that except to say that obviously without Udogie and Porro, there was a certain, lack of understanding perhaps from those who came in terms of how to keep that pace up and to play in the way that we want to. It wasn't Ange ball, it was flange ball.
Do you know what? I will make you laugh. Obviously, Russ is on the show. It's not Russ Williams in the comment. It might be Russ Williams. This isn't Russ in the comment here. But Mr. Williams 1882 says the only team we'll be given a cuffing is the under 11s. Yeah. I don't want to worry you guys. Andrew's already said that in his pre-match press conference because Spurs don't have Chelsea. Obviously, next week they're arranging some form of an internal game with, obviously, of course, the reserve players. So let's hope that's not the cuffing that Marcus is talking about, and we have got one saved up. I mean, let's hope that's another one where...
No, I'll tell you what will happen in that, Ricky. We'll pick up 4 injuries.
Captain Jerry.
You know what, Russ, you was here last season when we kept on saying in that first half of the season, we're conserving energy. We're conserving energy for the second half of the season. Wow. Can you put your finger down, Russ, to these first half displays where it takes an Ange team to get them going in the second half?
It's a bit Conte-esque, isn't it, really, in many ways? I mean, I thought that excuse me, the defenders for Wolves today, Totti, Max Kilman. I thought they played really well, and I think they find it easier to play well when there's no pace and speed and nobody's going down the sides. I come back to that again. Nobody's beating their man, crossing the ball hard and low. We've seen Richarlison, 9 goals in 9 games, by the way, before people start writing him off, apart from today, get on the end of those sort of crosses and score. But it just seems that the biorhythms are not quite right at the moment. And when you've got players that are underperforming compared to what we know they have done and they can do, it doesn't make it easy. And we're easy to work out. I mean, you know, all this sideways passing and then back a bit and then back out to the side. And this is not the Ange ball that we saw, but this is what we've been served up in the last 3 or 4 games, at least. And so I don't know, you know, is the messaging wrong? I really don't know. Are they tired? Are they unfit? The ones that have come back? All sorts of questions.
You know, on that point, I know Marcus brought up earlier in the show in relation to what are they doing in training. I think, again, this is what's been referenced a lot. And I think, Marcus, you guys, your journalists have said this on the Tottenham way as well, that, you know, the Ange system does take a lot in terms of intensity and work rate. And I think, again, what we've seen with Ange really is that, you know, in the first season, there are a number of injuries. And once the sides and the players have got accustomed to the way they play, those injuries seem to peter out in the second season. I think my concern is that, look, whilst we've got a really good, in my opinion, a first 11, as we've alluded to already, it's those that are then called in that have to then play when the supposed better players aren't playing. That's where you've got your problems. And I think, again, it goes into what Marcus says is that in the summer, I know we've got Bergvall coming in, a really young, promising player, but you still feel Spurs are a way off. When you look at the moment, the way the top 3 are playing, if I'm being honest with you, and again, I hate to look at them down the road where I think for them, it's 11 goals in the last 3-4 games. We look way off that at the moment. And that's just me being honest about it. You know, we want to be honest and brutal about the show. That's where we are at the moment. So look, we have to hope things are going to change. I think what we have to really have hope about is that those first 10 games showed us what this Spurs side are capable of. And when many are suggesting the fact, and many have said it already on the show, that when are we going to see a 90-minute performance under Ange? Now, I want to give me confidence that based on those 10 games at the start, when that does eventually click, we are going to see that. And I think, you know, as the guys have alluded to, there has been pros and reasons why we haven't seen that maybe today in terms of the availability out there. But look, I think the result does give Ange a lot to think about. And ultimately, there's got to be improvement. He's got 2 weeks now to really look to really try and get these players back, the likes of Udogie and Porro, we understand, are hopefully in contention for Palace. And Anthony Costa, good friend of the show, bless him, who I was going to speak to before the game, did say to me, Rick, it is that manager bounce, isn't it? Palace are on the edge of appointing Oliver Glasner, whose first game it looks like will be Spurs away. And you know what? I can see Marcus there looks in such pain from all the years Spurs have done to him with managers on their first appearance being Spurs away. That will not be an easy game. Oliver Glasner's going to have a couple of weeks to work with those players. And look, Roy Hodgson, we've sent him obviously our best wishes in his recovery, of course. But he will have Tottenham as his first game. That will not be easy now, Crystal Palace, in a couple of weeks' time. It really, really won't. But what we are going to do, for all your sake, we are going to go for our final break of the show for our listeners on audio. Now, let me give you some light relief. Look, if you're looking maybe in these next couple of weeks to get yourselves away, and I wouldn't blame you for doing so, go and check out NordVPN. Right now is a really good time to get yourself away for a couple of weeks. If you're looking for a chance to have yourself some flights at a discounted rate, you can change your location settings. So even if you're in a different country, you can still, of course, enjoy the pleasures of maybe not football, a different sport you're interested in by changing your location settings. You can do it by going to nordvpn.com/LWS. We've got a current discount on where you can get 4 extra months for free on a 2-year plan. And there's no risk renewals, 30-back money guarantee. And yeah, go and check Nord out. They're great. We love having them part of the show. But look, Spurs...
Rick, I'd love to go somewhere warm for a couple of weeks, wouldn't you?
You can shut up.
Can you imagine? Just going somewhere nice and warm, palm trees, beaches.
Yeah.
Be lovely, wouldn't it? Oh,
dear.
Very pleasant, mild, spring-like afternoon in Tottenham today, Crackers. You don't know what you missed.
But Crack, the problem with you is, Crack, you'll always be Spurs, so there'll always be something that lets you down in your life. You might have the most amazing landscape and background of the sun and the sea.
I know.
Unfortunately, Spurs
Rick,
are always there to bring it down.
Rick, spare a thought for me. I'm going to Sweden next, -4 today.
Oh.
There I go. And snow. There you go.
There's your winter break for you mid-season. There's Russ's winter break mid-season.
Well,
there you go.
Absolutely. Maybe I should take Decky with me and give him a pep talk.
Well, you know what? Let's bring on to Decky, Russ. You mentioned him there. 35 seconds into the second half. Was a fine finish from Decky. A royal throw-in. Richie held it up.
He needed it, Rick.
He needed it. But overall, look, great move from him. 6th goal of the season. I think it's the first since Forest back in December the 15th. On the day, tried to make things happen in the final third. Of course, got his goal, but was unlucky actually with a cutting effort that was tipped around the post from Sarr. But overall, where has that player been, Russ? The player that we saw in the first 12 months of him joining the football club for you? Is it just trying to find that consistency?
No, he's regressed for whatever reason. But I have to tell you, in Sweden, they refer to him as the best player in their national team. So he's revered there. I do think that he has regressed. I mean, he might well be watching, mightn't he, Rick? A lot of the players watch The Last Word on Spurs, and I don't want to upset him, but I would say to him in Swedish, I would say Dejan vi älskar dig, men du måste försöka hårdare, which is, Dejan, we love you, but you have to work a little harder. And that is what I think he needs to do.
You know what?
Because it's all very well huffing and puffing, but you're not going to blow the house down. If you understand what I mean.
I want to come to, first of all, very impressed with your Swedish. I'm assuming you're not making that up, Russ. But and if you like, you could take Emerson Royale with you and perhaps leave him there for a couple of months. But
he wouldn't like the snow, I don't think, Emerson. I think it was a cold day for him today.
Well, it was, and actually, as much as Emerson struggled today, there's a part of me I really like him because he does give 100%. And listen, the system doesn't suit him, and maybe he's not quite at the level that we need him to be. But I do like Emerson Royale for some reason, but I think Kulusevski is quite easy to underestimate. And one of the reasons I'll say that is from last week's game against Brighton, where, first half we weren't particularly good. Then we started the second half really well, and he was instrumental in, I think, really taking the game to Brighton. We got the equaliser. And then Ange, and this is another interesting one, going back to last week, and obviously you spoke about it then, but he made the 3 substitutions that he was going to make before we scored. And actually that then had a really detrimental effect on the next 25 minutes of that game. Brighton were all over us. And what struck me in particular, when Kulusevski went off in the second half against Brighton and Johnson came on, Johnson actually was ineffectual until the very end, when, of course, he popped up with the key moment. But I do think that Kulusevski does a job that we don't always appreciate. He quite often occupies his fullback. He keeps the opposition honest, if you like, and yet it's not razzmatazz. It's not necessarily something that you're going to spot from the stands. I appreciate that he hasn't sort of had the dramatic impacts at times that got us so excited about him when he and Bentancur first came to the club. But I do still like Kulusevski, and I think he's got a really big future to play for us. It was just to me, and that's the point as well that I wanted to make, that Russ has touched on a couple of times. I get so frustrated when we do come forward and we crisscross with the passing, but nobody is trying to take on the fullback, to get wide, to whip in a ball, and anything might happen once that ball comes in. It can skid all over the place. It can cannon off someone. You can get an own goal. Who knows? We just did not do that again today, and Sonny's not inclined to do it. Werner, I think, he's got the pace, but he actually came up with one really good cross today, but we know that his end product sometimes isn't good enough. Johnson tries to do it. I want Kulusevski to do that a bit more. Let's take a chance occasionally. And, if that's the tweak I would be looking at, that Crackers is talking about, all this intricate stuff and trying to get through the middle, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes just take it wide, whip the ball in, and let's see what happens. That to me, which sounds, pretty straightforward, but I do think that days like today, that's what I was crying out to see.
I just find at times, it's Spurs, we just overcomplicate a lot of what seems very, very basic and simplistic in front of our eyes. And, Cracks to bring you in. Look, grateful from Spurs actually denied Kulusevski with that great save low down. And then the dreaded goal for Wolves to put them in front. A scintillating counter-attack by the visitors. Gomes at the double. Basuma losing the ball in the edge of the box. From a Spurs corner, a must-have. And then Wolves duly punishing us. Neto really carrying the ball up the majority of the pitch. Cut back inside Emerson. Teed up Gomes to sweep home after a Spurs corner. I mean, look, Neto created it. They broke with real speed. Spurs punished on the break. And despite having a much better half in terms of the second half to begin with, Cracks we fall behind. And I think I've got to be honest with you, whilst I had hope against Brighton, we'd come back. Sheffield United, we'd come back. I'll be honest with you, with this game against Wolves, I was really worried after that second goal. I just didn't feel we were going to have enough, let alone score one, but two. I didn't see we were going to score 2 goals, Cracks, after they went ahead.
No, because they're so well drilled to be able to just block you out basically, and then do what they done. Neto's some player, isn't he? To be fair, he is. I mean, the running he does and his quality, I would absolutely love to see him at Spurs, and he plays that role perfectly, and with Basuma, I mean, he actually made a really good interception about a minute before he lost the ball on the halfway line, and it was poor from Basuma to lose that there. But when you're playing that high line, it's really high risk as well. So, losing that ball in most systems, somebody will get you out of trouble or attempt to. Playing how we did towards the end, getting well into the second half, and you lose the ball there is literally suicide, isn't it? It just everything collapses around you because it's that high risk, high reward, but even higher loss when you do make a mistake like that. So it was a classic Wolves goal. It was a counter punch, and I mean, earlier on you put up the stats from the game. It just shows you sometimes. There you go. I mean, if you looked at that, you'd go, "Wow, Spurs must have been really unlucky today." Well, the truth of it with your eyes was we was actually lucky not to get beat by more. So when they did have possession, when they did have shots, they really made them pay and punish us. And we were just too sloppy with that possession. There just wasn't enough zip, enough zing, not enough forward thinking passes like we was doing at the start of the season. We were actually playing out from defence, and we were away, gone, looking for the ball, a diagonal over the top, through the middle, and then turn and gone. We just seem to be taking an extra touch now. I see a couple of people in the comments saying that in the last 2 games, you would have thought that Conte was still in charge. That sort of ponderous across the edge of the box passing, the really sort of busy doing nothing, going nowhere, taking an extra touch. And we just need to find that mojo again from early season where everything was just a little bit more urgent, a little bit more zingy. So as much as we've given Ange a bit of a working over and a good kicking tonight, then the players may need to just have a little reset and find what it was that they were doing at the start of the season, that urgency, that little bit more bravery, that little bit more zip in their game. It can't be tiredness, can it? I mean, it must just be coming back from some injuries and key personnel. I get that they will be well worked under Ange Postecoglou's systems. You have got to do a lot of work within a game, but not to the point of where we seem to be now, this lackluster, undercooked performances we've got. And I mean, if we do get Europe, that's going to be even more of a concern, because if we're looking like this without it, then if we're at the back of Bratislava on a Thursday night and then playing again on Saturday evening or Sunday, Dynamo cheeky go away on a Thursday night and then Wolves away on the Sunday, we're gonna look all over the place. So there's a few things that need fixing, but we've got to find that zip and zing again. That's for sure.
Yeah, we do. I mean, look, just finishing off on a goal. Gomes kissed Neto's boot in celebration. I mean, look, that guy, if Spurs are one of the clubs that are looking at him on the radar, I think that would be a really impressive signing for Tottenham. Who then subsequently made a triple sub. Bentancur, Werner, Johnson coming on for Richie, Sarr, Basuma. Son stayed on the left. Werner played as the 9. Johnson out on the right. Kulu back into midfield. Russ, on the back of that change, could you understand what Andrew was trying to do, that sub?
Yeah, it was all or nothing. Score. That's all he was doing. I mean, there were so many attacks.
You were happy with that sub? You were happy with the players coming in for those that went off?
Well, yes, and I'll tell you why I was happy, because when we had these 3 home games coming up, for us to really be not unassailable, but in a position of Champions League football, win those 3, and really we'd be difficult to stop. You could forget about United. Obviously, you could forget about Chelsea. Villa now, of course, they've lost 2 and now they've won at Fulham today. So it's topsy-turvy for everybody. But I thought it was really important that we won the game today, however, by hook or by crook. But I think our hook or by crook game was Brighton, wasn't it? And you could argue that maybe it was even Brentford as well, apart from that sparkling 7 minutes at the start of the second half. So I could see why he was doing it. And I think there's an element that he feels under pressure to win games, probably believes, the Ange ball stuff and genuinely feels it here that he's got to try and do something for the club that he manages and all the fans and give us all a lift and what have you. But it simply didn't work because we didn't have the guile to break down a low block. We didn't want to go down the sides and pass the ball. Third time of saying it on the show. To me, it's so bloody obvious. 2-touch football round the box, as Crackers said, and Marcus was saying, it's ponderous, it's slow. So you can have 11 attackers on, but if they're all doing that, you're probably not going to score. And it was a risk. We could have conceded a 3rd or a 4th if things hadn't have gone our way. In fact, we nearly did concede a 3rd. But I understand what he was doing today. Some of the other substitutions, as we've talked about on the show in other games, I felt have been a bit early, a bit strange sometimes, but somehow we've kind of almost got away with it in all of those games. But today was a different kettle of fish. We can sit here analysing and crying over spilt milk, but that's exactly what it is. We've got to clean it up and have a nice clean kitchen floor for 2 weeks when Palace turn up.
Absolutely. Coming on to that, as we look to bring it to a close, just a couple of things I will say. Look, Sarr, who was influential against Brighton only a week or so ago, couldn't quite have that same impact as we mentioned. He was replaced with 20 to go. Basuma named for the first time in a lineup since Forest away in December. Did contribute, as Crackers mentioned, to a vital tackle on Semedo in the box in the first half. Showed a good cut of touches, but look, I think he'll admit it wasn't his best display. I'm sure, like I say, he'll want to perform better than that. And again, I'm sure that game will unfortunately be renowned for the fact he gave away the ball that led to the second goal. Emerson Royale, at one point, dug himself out of a huge amount of trouble with a block on the goal after giving away the ball far too easily further up the pitch. I mean, what I will just say is, and again, before everybody has a go at me for screaming to their defence, the likes of Davis, Royale coming in, when you are trying to play such as the Tottenham way of playing is a high line, I think it's very hard when you're coming in for just one game out of a possible 11 or 12 to then put in a decent performance where you haven't got a regular run of games. That's not me putting a full defence of the players. That's just me acknowledging the fact that this system does, I think, need the likes of the Udogis, the Poros that are playing week in, week out in a fairly combative system. Spurs did make a couple of further subs on their game. Lo Celso and Højbjerg replaced Maddison and Royale. Maddison created an opportunity for Kulusevski early on, but really struggled to make things work. At the very, very end of the game, huge chance for Ben Davies, who got the header horribly wrong. I mean, as Russ touched upon, Ben overall had a solid game. But look, I'll be honest with you, it's the kind of last player you'd want on the end of that, which was a huge missed opportunity for Spurs to make it 2-2. And look, for Richie, all for his effort, which I think Marcus touched upon, Just didn't happen for him against Wolves. And I just wonder, again, I don't want to keep every time he has a poor game, going on the guy. But in terms of our attacking movement being so quick and precise, the ball bounces off him so much and he gives it away far too much for my liking that I just wonder, look, we're now looking at 12, 13 games to go. I think Spurs will reanalyse and look at what the summer holds in regards to that number 9. Do they go in for that? Are they going to go for another wide player? We'll see. But just to give some, I think, very much praise, I think Vicario can probably hold his head high in terms of his overall performance. I think if it wasn't Vicario between the sticks, Spurs would have arguably conceded more. But yeah, for everybody else, a bit of an off day. So look, guys, we're going to close it on this. Palace obviously are the next up for Tottenham home game. We've had 3 in a row. We've obviously had the win against Brighton. We've had 0 return from Wolves. I'll start with you, Cracks. How important is this Palace game now? When Palace rock up in a couple of weeks' time, they'll have a new manager. They may be invigorated. This is a different kind of Palace that we would be facing, obviously, under Roy Hodgson, right?
You don't know, do you? Sometimes you don't quite get that new manager bounce. They do have a few decent players, one or two, but overall, Rick, we should be skittling them, shouldn't we? And if you don't, then you don't deserve to be going to any European competitions or doing anything. So look, I think it's a game where we just need to find our mojo to go again, to ask questions, to get that zip back and just be a little bit braver than we have been. Get back to them early philosophies. It's a perfect team to get them turned, make them deal with us, get in their faces, just be that bit more aggressive, a bit quicker. And as Marcus said, just try throwing a few crosses into the box as well, rather than keep inverting, keep going into the sweet shop and buying lottery tickets, because eventually you are going to scratch a couple of 50 quid winners, aren't you? If you ain't buying lottery tickets, you ain't winning nothing. So look, just go and be a little bit ballsy. Today we wasn't, and we got beat. We've all seen by being ballsy, if you get beat, the crowd will stay with you. Look what happened in the Chelsea game. We tried to be ballsy. We ended up actually getting walloped, but we got applauded off the pitch because people could see we was actually trying to stand for something and trying to do something and trying to be brave. Man alive, to dare is to do, isn't it? Surely. So I just want to see a little bit more daring and a little bit more doing against a poor Palace side, new manager or not. We have got to really just try another get a bit of a go, and not what we saw today. These players, do you know what? In these 2 weeks, Rick, I don't think we need a game in that. I think they all need a night down the pub. I'd take them all down the pub. I would. I'd take them all out for a couple of beers and just boys, come on. Sometimes that does. You'd be surprised. The amount of players I speak to, and they've said, look, this was happening, that was happening, and it wasn't quite right. So we all went down the pub. We went down the pub. We had a couple of drinks and we told a couple of untruths to each other, and things were a lot better after that. Down the spoons. Don't want to be playing like the under 11s. Take them down the spoons. 2-1 on a Thursday night. Come on, Tottenham. Get your act together.
Well, we know Ange watches, so note to Ange. Number 1, buy lottery tickets. Number 2, take the boys down the pub. That's Crack's motivational team talk out of Palace in a couple of weeks. Marcus, I know you can follow that, my man. I'm sure you guys will be dissecting this and more in the Tottenham way in the next couple of weeks. Give me your thoughts, Marcus, on what you want to see change ahead of Palace in a fortnight's time.
Well, first of all, I'm available for the drink up, so hopefully I'll get the invitation for that one. I think that Palace game now becomes very important. We need Luton to do us a favour. If Manchester United win
Absolutely.
again,
Yep.
Suddenly they are right on our coattails, and it's becoming a 3-horse race really for that 4th place in all probability. So the pressure's going to be on, and I think in terms of Palace, by the way, new manager or not, the key for them is having their 2 best players, Elise and Eze, fit. I think they've only started 4 times together this season, and they've had Gahey injured as well, who is a good defender. If they're not back, I think I don't care who's in the dugout for them. Frankly, even if they're playing, that game is absolutely critical now, because if you look further down the line, obviously we're going to go to Chelsea. We've got that massive period towards the end of this.
April is tough.
Exactly. When we end up playing, what is it, Manchester City and Arsenal and Liverpool? Is it almost back to back, something like that?
Yep.
So we need to have before then a slightly easier last couple of matches. So the Palace game is a must-win game. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. I'm also extremely confident that we will win it, and we might even give them a cuffing. That cuffing I was talking about. Remember this, boys, in a couple of weeks' time when we put 5 past the Palace. I told you first. And if we don't, then forget what I just said.
Marcus, mate, it's always a pleasure. Where can we hear your dulcet tones for those that don't know where to find you? I know there's a lot of avid listeners to the Tottenham Way. Where can they find it, Marcus?
Yeah, the Tottenham Way podcast, it's available via all good all good podcast manufacturers. I should have prepared this. Spotify, whatever it is, it's me, Dan Kilpatrick, who's the Evening Standards football correspondent, Tom Allnut of the Times, and Tom Barkley of the Sun. And we like to feel that it sort of links nicely to then everybody watching this fantastic show at the end of each week. So we normally do a review and then a little preview ahead of the next match as well.
Marcus, we're waiting for it to drop. Thank you so much. Look, Crackers is off for a month. Russ is off for a couple of weeks on annual leave now. He's unfortunately, Russ might be looking forward to it. He's back with us for Palace. If I need to remind the poor bloke. He won't feel happy about it now, but he is on a bit of a break. Russ, what do you want to see happen in these next couple of weeks for Tottenham? What do you see need to change? What needs to happen?
Try and get back to a plan. Show them a few videos how they used to play. Talk to them. Build up their confidence. Come up with a plan, because I do think Marcus is right. New German manager, playing us at a beautiful stadium.
It's going to be a tough game now, I tell you.
They've got good away support. As Marcus correctly said, 2 of the best players could be back. I mean, Eze could be in the England squad, couldn't he, in the summer? So, but we really do have to, as Crackers said, we've got to beat Crystal Palace. Because we've got some horrendous games coming up. And maybe, Marcus, the shellacking we're going to give somebody is Arsenal. Let's keep our fingers crossed. That'd be lovely, wouldn't it? Oh. But we've got to beat Palace. We really needed to win today, and we needed to beat Brighton. So 2 out of 3 is not that bad. But a draw, or heaven forbid, a loss against Palace, and it doesn't bear thinking about. I think I'll be calling in sick on the night of that podcast, Rick. But let's be positive. We're going to win, of course.
Absolutely.
Rick, just very, very quickly, playing like a Liverpool or a Chelsea or an Arsenal might actually suit us more against rather than a low block team. I know that Chelsea have been the same. Anybody that's low blocked them, they've struggled against, and anybody that comes at them, they actually do quite well. So I may be talking completely out my derriere here, but you might find that we do get a few more chances against teams that do play open. I mean, City hate playing us, don't they? Generally, but so who knows? Who knows? We might lose to Palace and then win those 3 games. 3.
You don't know with Tottenham.
Marcus is so stunned he's dropped his camera.
No, I'll be honest with you, that was my reaction there, the fact that what's April to come there. Marcus showing me the fixtures. Guys, listen, I've got to say a massive thank you. We've been joined by the brilliant Marcus Buckland over at the Tottenham Way, broadcaster Russ Williams, and the brilliant Richard Cracknell. Guys, thank you for your support. Well, over a couple thousand of you watching this live. We'll be back with you very, very soon. Some specials coming your way to try and ease your ears in this next week or so. But listen, guys, thanks so much for all your support from myself, from Russ, from Cracks, from Marcus. We've been the last one on Spurs. Keep safe, keep well. And as always,